Dr. ebook is Fáilte. Hi, hello, and welcome. It's John O'Sullivan from the Irish Pagan School, and I decided to pop on here and have a bit of a chat with you today, because I have a story to tell, and it's one that I was reminded of literally today as Laura and I were out and about doing our kind of business, running errands in the morning and kind of interacting with the sunshine and the sea. But this story has nothing got to do with the sunshine and the sea. It's got to do with accountability to a certain degree, at the power of words to another degree, and also the influence of the other crowd and the divine on our abilities. So if you're interested in that, if you're interested in hearing a story about me, you may have come across me so far in YouTube. You may have caught some of my videos hear about how I met the Morrigan, how I met the Dagda, the story, how I accidentally made myself the drinking vessel of the Dagda for an evening, which was a different tale for a different time. But this story is about how my mouth got me in trouble with Queen Maeve. So if you're interested, do stick around for that. As ever, thank you very much for all of you here in our YouTube community, kind of connecting with us and leaving the likes, the subscribes, etc. It's really, really helpful. Also the comments, asking us the questions, helping us kind of keep relevant and kind of connected with the interest of what's going on, and not just presenting what it is that we feel we should be talking about. But this time it's me kind of telling this bit of a story. So I got to take you back a couple of years. Laura and I were we living together at that point? We weren't even living together at that point, which means this predates the founding of the Irish Pagan School. There's one for you. So this is pre-2017. And so I was still living up in Dublin. Laura was in Roscommon, and we were having a long-distance relationship. But as part of that work and supporting her in her tour guiding work, whenever there was a group coming in or groups going around, if I could be there, I always wanted to be there. And so this particular instance, we of course are going around the Tulsk region of Roscommon, the kind of Tulsk heritage kind of site, which is Rathcroghan, which is the seat of Queen Maeve. Now, I had done this tour a number of times with Laura in the past. And it involves a number of different stages, visiting a couple of different sites within the Rathcroghan complex itself, from Ogla Well through to the heritage centres, then out to the main mound and up the hill itself and around. So it's a really, really great tour to go on, and the landscape there is absolutely fascinating. But Rathcroghan, the hill itself, is the seat of Queen Maeve. It's the royal site in Connacht for the Queen. Absolutely. And as I mentioned, I've been there multiple times before. I had the honor and privilege of actually going around there myself in Laura and I's origin story, how I met the Morrigan. And I've been back a number of times since. And at this point, my own relationship with the Dagda was beginning to build, and I was learning more and more about the power of words and the responsibility that goes with the power of words. And sometimes the lessons we need to learn are the ones that, involve consequences, serious consequences. So we had gone out and around, and you may have some impression of how much I talk from these videos, and in social settings or gatherings, or if I'm working with a tour guide group, I talk a lot. I actually do. It's quite rare for me to be quiet when I'm on. So yeah, we are roaming around. We've gone to a couple of sites. I'm engaging and chatting and kind of facilitating some story elements as well, supporting Laura's kind of teaching and tour guiding for the experience of the group. And then we get to the car park for the main mound of Rathcroghan, and I'm a little bit irreverent. I am, when it comes to certain things, I'm a bit tongue-in-cheek. It's my nature, it's my humor, it's most often playful. Actually, no, it's pretty much always playful, but that doesn't mean it's always appropriate. Sometimes, I'm not as sensitive as I wasn't. I'm learning to be more responsible and more aware of the impact of, my humor, because even though I might find it funny, it might not be a joke to somebody else. And regardless of my intent, if the impact is hurtful or harmful, it's still a hurtful or harmful situation. So we're out there, and I told a a tongue-in-cheek joke about what do you say to a mouse with a chipped tooth? Hard cheese, which is this kind of, well, it's like tough luck in essence. And then I went one step further and I said, well, I suppose that's one thing a mouse with a chipped tooth and a Maeve would have in common, as in Queen Maeve, hard cheese. Now, for those who don't know, and at that point I didn't fully know, and now that I have gone through my personal experience, I do know better. I need to give you a bit of a rave scale, a pre-story. So Queen Maeve of Connacht, was this warrior battle queen, ruler of Connacht throughout the Táin, led a combined army of most of Ireland against the raid into Ulster to get the cattle, the bowl of Cooley. The long and the short of it, that is the entire Táin. But Queen Maeve survived. Queen Maeve did not die in the Táin. She returned and was very successful for a longer period of her life. The demise of Queen Maeve, though, came at the hand of her nephew. Her nephew was under the impression that she killed his mother. Now, the story is that the mother was pregnant and she was slain in childbirth, and he was born from that. But other perspectives on, and again, the lore that we have to acknowledge is written from certain perspectives, certain biases, very male perspectives and male biases. So, there's a suggestion, a possibility that if you read the story from a different perspective, Queen Maeve may have been actually involved in, delivering the child in the only way that the child could be delivered for her sister, which was by pretty much an early cesarean section. Now, again, we're here in our future time. There is like generations and centuries worth of distance from us to back then. But long and short of it is, her sister dies, the child survives, the child is sent off and raised. She doesn't cast away the child, she makes sure that the child is raised. But the child then finds out that his mother died at the hand of Maeve, and he takes in his head that he needs to get vengeance for it. And so he knows that she's a battle queen. He's not going to be able to take her in battle. And so he goes to training himself every day with a sling. And so he's training with a sling to, have the longest cast, the most accurate cast, the fastest cast, the hardest cast, so that he would put any stone in the sling and he would wind it up and you'd let it go and he would get it right every time. And so he was building the story of vengeance all the while Maeve is carrying on her rule. But the demise of Maeve actually comes as she has gone out away from all of her own land towards a place where she would do her morning bathing. It's I think it's in Innisclochran that she would actually go to the lake of Innisclochran and she would kind of bathe there every day. Now, it's a long way away from the Mount of Rathcroghan, but that's what the story tells us. And it's there that her nephew comes across her while she's bathing. But in his hurry and his rush, he doesn't have any stones. There's nothing nearby. He can load a sling. So he grabs the only thing that he has, which is his lunch. And in his lunch, he has a piece of hardened cheese. And so by casting that at her, he strikes Maeve accurately, spot on as he always trained, and slays her with his sling. So that is the end. That is the demise of the warrior queen, Queen Maeve, that we know of. That's what the story tells us. So take us back to this tour guide and John being foolish is like, well, obviously, hard cheese, Queen Maeve, making a joke out of her demise. So I'm standing in the car park, right? So essentially you pull off the main road into this car park area. And then there's a fenced off area which goes into the main kind of open grass, which then leads directly up to the grass, the main mound of Rathcroghan itself. And so I tell this joke, it's not a good joke. Let's be fair. It's just really poor and inappropriate and really bad behavior. And I should have known fucking better, but I didn't. And so the consequences arrived the moment I stepped across the gate onto the grass. Because as soon as he did that, I felt a tickle in my throat. And that's weird. Now, when we cross over, habitually Laura is leading the tour guide at that point. she takes the front, I stay at the back, and we go around, and she kind of takes people into the site and kind of explains the archaeology of the place, the history of the place, and connecting people with the story of Queen Maeve, the location, and some very fascinating kind of pieces within the landscape itself all around. And so I'm at the back of the group, of course, and we're making our way through. And again, I feel it's tickle in my throat. Now, again, Laura is talking. I'm just being supportive, and I always kind of hold my wish. I always stay quiet when that's happening. And then we make our way up on top of the main mound. And Laura has work that she goes through with the group, and there's everyone is standing in a wide circle all around. And I always stand beside Laura or with my back to back with Laura on top of the mount. And so I'm in that kind of position, and we're going through all the process, and I often, like, whenever there's a quiet moment, like, and when the tour is carrying on, I when Laura's work is done and there's a gap, she gives people space. She gives people space to enjoy the landscape, to stand upon the hill of Rathcroghan and look at all of the counties laid out all around, look at all the landscape all around. And it's absolutely beautiful landscape. I'm very, very fortunate. I'm very, very privileged to live in this beautiful island that I live in. And this is when I realized something was not right. Because whenever people go away, I would normally kind of just whisper or talk to Laura, and just kind of check in, not to disrupt anyone else's experience, but just to check in with her. And I open my mouth and no sound comes out. Nothing. Instant panic. The moment I could make noise as a kid, I have been making noise. There are, if I'm not reading a book, I'm making some kind of noise. If I'm not engaged in some, I've always been a natural born noisemaker. And so, yeah, I had no voice. There was no sound to me. There was no sound that I could make. And I had a panic reaction initially, of course, but then I felt the pressure on me of Maeve's attention. Standing on top of the main mound in Rathcroghan, with her eyeballing the fuck out of me, energetically speaking, because, and then my brain clicked into gear and I was like, yeah, oh, you John, you fucked up. So at that point, I realized that it was my mess and it's on me to fix. Consequences. Every action has consequences. What we do has consequences, has impact. And this was very real consequence and impact for me. And it was on me to try and resolve. So I stepped away and I went and found a quiet spot to sit down. And it was a very odd experience because the mindscape that I was in at the time was very tumultuous and very kind of caught up. There was multiple different things thinking all at the same time. What if this is like this forever? What if I can't fix this? What if, something happens and I can't cry out? And all of the panic kind of instinct, survival, fight, flight, freeze stuff was constantly going on. But at the same point, another aspect of my awareness was, and this is I've since learned it's kind of the spiritual awareness, maybe, for me. I had cottoned on to the fact that, this is cause and effect. This is literally just cause and effect. There is something happening here. It is very real. It is very impactful. It is very kind of significant and serious. But I caused it, which means I have to have some way of fixing it. And so I sat very quietly in there's a spot on the top of Rathcroghan, which I feel very comfortable in. And so I went to that spot and I sat down. And I had to kind of figure out, I had to go back through. And that's where, the barred brain files come in, and I'm flicking back through the stories. What could I have done? What did I do? And then I remembered the tickle in my throat. And then, the moment I stepped over, the moment I liminally crossed the boundary onto the hill, that's actually when it happened. What was I doing just before that? Oh. So realization strikes. Okay, what's the problem with that? Why? And so the bird brain goes back into the stories and is like, pretty much, I came to the seat of Queen Maeve's power. I came to one of the places where it's rumored part of her body is buried, her essential gravesite, and I was talking shit. I was being disrespectful, and this is something that, it's hard to express really how serious and real the impact of this kind of stuff is. This is just a guy on the internet telling a story. You're watching this and you're like, oh, it's just a guy telling a story, whatever. And yeah, absolutely, fully believe what you want to believe. I'm just relaying my experiences of it. But having had that interaction with Maeve and that awareness now that she literally just took my voice away, I had to find something to do to figure it out. And so, having reconciled myself with what I did wrong, found out, well, actually recognized who I had wronged, what the wrong was, I then had to find a way to work it through. And atop the hill, I followed Laura's journey practice that she teaches at the Irish Pagan School to try and go through myself, to figure out myself first, and then to kind of connect to the land beneath me, and then the other world, the collective unconscious and the other world through that process. And that's where I had a very particular experience of someone on that hill whose job was to not speak. That there was a person kept on that hill who had no voice and who was not to have a voice, whose role, whose purpose, whose entire task was to observe and remember, but not speak. And so I had this very, very real and scary experience for me, at the end of which I've talked in another video about Imbos, this kind of inspiration, this kind of lightning strike of awareness. This was one of the first times I actively moved myself into a state of Imbos. And through that journey experience and that connecting through what I perceived there, I wrote a poem. And I wrote a poem about the watcher, the one who watches on the hill. And so at the end of that poem, I did it. I wrote it down. I recorded it on my phone, and when it was done, I felt Maeve's presence again. But again, my connection with Maeve, I don't have a connection with Maeve. I've never pursued a spiritual connection with Maeve, which is why, again, she's like, no, I can just do this to you. This can just happen to you because, you've disrespected me on my land, in my place. And so, yeah, I completed this poem and I felt Maeve's presence again. And it was this awareness of like, that'll do. But I still didn't get my voice back. At that point, many people were finishing. They enjoyed their time atop the hill of Rathcrohan. They began to gather up and move around and head down the hill and back out towards the gate. And as ever, Laura is the last to come down on that. And I always go just before Laura. And so everyone is gathering up and everyone is coming over. And then Laura comes over to where I'm sitting. And she's like, John, we're going. And I give a nod. Then Laura, quick as, just looks at me and is like, what did you do? What happened? And I pointed at my throat and I was like, and she's like, okay. She kind of got that I couldn't speak from my gesticulations. And she's like, is there anything I can do to help? And I shook my head, no. And she's like, do you need to stay here? And I was like, no. So we made our way down off the hill. We finished out our kind of process there upon the hill of Rathcrohan, and then made our way back across the grass through the gate. And as with all of these things, when there is a start, there is always a finish. If you're able to move through the right process and figure out through the right relationship, there is a point where it finishes. And I had become aware at the point that it started, the gate was the point that it would finish, the gate. So, but I couldn't just flee and run to the gate. I had to make my way through the proper processional way, make my way down off the hill, following the right kind of steps, remembering and going over the words and the memories that I had that had been given to me on the hill. And then we made it back through the gate, and everyone's kind of gathering up, and Laura's in tour guide mode again, like, gathering up the people, making sure that they're all kind of getting loaded on their buses and everything else. And I'm coming in last, closing the gate behind us and making sure that's all locked. And as soon as I stepped off the grass, it was beyond the grass back onto the gravel kind of car park area that I was able to cough. And when I coughed, a noise came out of my mouth. Now, there's many different noises we make that aren't words. Like we can hum, we can whistle, I could make no noise. There was zero noise that could come out of my mouth at all, or my throat. I couldn't even hum. There was nothing. And so the moment when I stepped onto the gravel and I coughed and I heard myself cough, I knew I was okay. I'd done the work, I'd figured it out, and I'd balanced out the wrong that I had committed. So, it's a cool story, John. Why are you telling me this story? Why are you still here? If you are still here, as always, I follow the old ancient Irish tradition, the ancient bardic tradition of a teaching tale. All of the old stories are designed to give a teaching, to give a lesson. It's that age old. And the moral of the story is. So what's the teaching in this one? Maybe you've picked up on some of it already. Maybe you have an idea. But really it is the fact that there are very real consequences to living a spiritual life. And just because you don't have a direct working relationship with a particular deity, guide, guardian, or whatever, doesn't mean that there can't be impactful circumstances based on you and your actions. So I wear another t-shirt every so often. You may have seen another video on ignorance may be bliss, but it's also no excuse. The moment we actually know, the moment we have awareness, the moment we have acknowledgement of these stories, we can't just claim ignorance as a defense. We're required to do better. We're required to, have a better standard, strive for a better standard. And so someone like me, a storyteller, an Irish bard, someone who was working with a tour guide group who'd come in to disrespect one of our ancient queens/goddesses of Ireland on her own landscape, the onus on me was 100% to be doing better. And in that instant, I wasn't. And in that instant, I wasn't protected by ignorance, which means she had 100% right to claim from me a price for the indiscretion I did. And so I'm not telling this story to scare anyone. Okay, that's not the purpose of this. It's not like John trying to scare you away from. Absolutely not. What I'm trying to say is that there are very real consequences from living a spiritual life, engaging in a spiritual existence, but then choosing, even unintentionally, misinformation, poor information, bad behavior, or disrespect. There are consequences. All of the circumstances that we teach, all that we teach at the Irish Pagan School goes back to this idea of this core equivalence, this right relationship. And if you don't know, okay, you're protected by a certain student level of needing to know, needing to grow and learn. But once you've grown, once you've kind of learned enough, there is an onus on you to know better. And by you, I mean me. And so I'm telling this story again, learn from my bad example. Learn because I did it wrong. So hopefully you won't do it wrong. It is a purpose of being accountable for the words that we speak, being aware of the impact of the words that we speak, even those which are a joke. Because in many cases, it's not only a joke. It's quite real. It's quite impactful. And I'm not even talking in the spiritual sense. I'm not even talking in dealing with God's guides, guardians, and the other crowd. I'm talking about, the impact that we have on each other. the words that we use towards each other, or even the words that we use towards ourselves. And I will hands up on this one. Absolutely, I am mean to myself. My internal monologue, quite mean to me. I'm very fortunate that there's a lot of people around me who call me out on it when my internal monologue becomes my external monologue and I vocally wound myself with words. There's a whole rule of three that was established, different story for a different time. But yeah, I think it's just really the purpose of telling this story is to highlight a direct experience I had, talk about the landscape of Ireland, talk about the real impact that these deities and these kind of guardians, guides, other crowd individuals have in our real world, but then also encourage, maybe by a teaching story, each of us to be aware of the power of our words and the impact that we can have through our words, so that maybe we will all try and choose the right words and be a bit more gentle, caring, and compassionate towards each other. So, hey, that's me talking. I have been at this for quite a while. I have told you a weird and hopefully wonderful story. I hope you've enjoyed being here. Thank you very, very much for enjoying us and for being around us. It's 2022 when I record this, so we're not doing any tour guide work. Laura isn't doing any tour guide work because she is in burnout recovery with the Irish Pagan School there at the moment. Not least of all is she's taking care of her master's in regional history too, which she's a legend. You may think you're a fan of Laura's work. I'm a really big fan of Laura's work. I absolutely adore everything she does. And yeah, hopefully maybe in the future when we're back at tour guiding again, when we're back at kind of engaging with people on the landscape of Ireland, maybe we'll meet you on the hill of Rathcron and you can see if you enjoy the view from there. So until next time, look after yourself, take care of yourself. Goraibh Míle Maith agus Slán. Goodbye.